So I'm David Teten. I will skip ahead to my part of the presentation. So first off, there's no need to take notes, no need to even pay too much attention. The full slide deck is at ffvc.com/angel. I'm going to go through this at a very fast pace because this is actually about a 2-hour workshop that we're compressing into 20 minutes. So you will see me referencing a lot of websites and resources which are detailed in the full slide deck that you can access. Let me start with a headline. Angel investing is very risky. On any given investment, you are quite likely to lose your money. But in the aggregate, angel investing shows very high returns. We've looked at a dozen different angel studies, and the lowest median returns are 18%. The highest was north of 50%. So it's an unusual asset class. Most asset classes, virtually every other asset class with returns like that, would attract institutional money, which would lower returns. That's the problem in the hedge fund world. It's extremely hard to repeat high performance. Angel investing, because it's so illiquid, it's hard to get into, there's a lot of labor typically involved with any one transaction, and your investing is dependent on your personal involvement in many cases. All of that scares off institutional money. That allows you, as an individual investor, to get much better returns on the average than you're likely to get in other asset classes that you may consider. So angel investing, to use modern examples, has been behind some of America's best known companies. Google and Facebook, Dropbox, and so on. 3 of the companies here are investments from my firm. Quigo, acquired by AOL for $340 million. Cornerstone On Demand, it's now a public company, billion-plus valuation. Clout, many of you probably know your Clout score. So my firm invested in all those companies at the seed level with a couple people, and they're now significant companies. So this is true not just in the modern era, but also historically, right? IBM, companies like that. Those also had angel investors 100 years ago who are now quite wealthy. So a little background on my firm. ffVentures Capital is one of the most active seed stage VCs in New York. We have invested in over 55 companies. We've been investing since 1999. We are also the least efficient asset management company in America. We have 15 employees, and that's on about $50 million in assets. So many of you probably work in the asset management industry and could do the math, which is the typical fund structure doesn't pay for that type of headcount. The only reason we can afford that is because we're investing our past returns into the business. We have a gross IRR of north of 40% since 1999. So we're taking that profit, reinvesting the business. We have a financially sophisticated audience, so I'll tell you the tax and accounting reason. Operating income is taxed at a high level. So we're not very interested in operating income. We're glad to hire an additional person. Carried interest, taxed at a lower level. Qualified small business, and most of our businesses qualify as a qualified small business, which is a technical term for businesses that you invest in, which you hold for an extended period of time and meet certain other tests. They're taxed, courtesy of Obama, at 0%, right? So we, and also, by the way, our entrepreneurs, if they structure their company appropriately, we can be taxed at 0% on our investments in these companies, and so can you. So that's pretty attractive. And we're happy to forego the short-term operating income in order to get, we think, 10x that amount in a capital gain a decade from now. So a little bit of background on the angel investing market in general. So there are a lot of great reasons to be in the angel space. First is high returns. Second is it diversifies the portfolio. In your broader portfolio, you're probably correlated to the S&P, right? In many cases, that probably correlates with your job. If you work in finance, the market goes down 20%, you get laid off, and your portfolio goes down 20%. That can be unpleasant. You get educated, right? This is the future. This is where your children are going to work, is probably in this sector and sectors touched by the technology industry in particular. So you meet really interesting people. It's one of the great perks of this business is you work with young, smart, bright, ambitious people who are trying to change the world. That's fun. I meet a lot of Wall Street people say, look, I've made a lot of money, but really it's not fun, right? I want to do something that's more interesting. Particularly for people who are retired or semi-retired, it's an opportunity to be a mentor, help out, leverage your expertise, and you're also creating jobs. I hasten to add that we have surveyed our members of HBS Angels, and we said, do you care about social enterprise, jobs in the inner city? And they said, our number one goal is returns, right? And obviously, I, as a fiduciary, that's also my number one goal. That said, by the course of creating new businesses, you are creating new jobs. Our motivation for creating the Venture Capital Access Program, our initiative to support women and minority entrepreneurs, was not social enterprise. It was because we think that is an overlooked population of entrepreneurs, and by looking at it instead of overlooking it, we can identify some great investments. Being an angel investor, it may look really easy, right? All you have to do is just have some extra cash that you are willing to have locked up for 10 years and then have vaporized, right? But there are actually more requirements. So first off, obviously you need some money in the bank. You need a supportive spouse, right? Because these investments wobble all over the place, and you need a spouse who will not complain about the fact that your kid's college tuition is wobbling around and potentially going to zero, at least some percentage of it. You need a lot of patience for handling the fact that the average time to exit is 10 years, average, right? So that means it could be 20 years. Our very first investment ever, a company called Theater Mania, doing great. We invested 99, but it's still a private company, right? So that's typical in this industry. You have to do significant due diligence. In mutual fund land, hedge fund land, you can take any amount of money, give it to your friendly local asset manager living in Greenwich, right? You don't have to do any work, just give them the money. In this asset class, the research shows clearly, the more due diligence you do, the more engaged you are operationally. As a board member, as an advisor, having lunch with the CEO, the higher your returns are. That is a cost to you, right? Because that means that you have to invest some time. You also ideally should have a diversified portfolio. I'd certainly counsel against putting most of your eggs in this particular basket. That said, there are some significant downsides to this asset class, right? So I mentioned, first of all, that because any given investment is highly risky, you need a large portfolio. Bare minimum, you should be able to have 25K in 10 different investments, preferably at least 20, right? It's only at the level of 20 investments that you start to see a real portfolio effect kick in. You also need to be able to handle the tracking of all these different investments, because you're going to get K1s, you'll have other accounting issues that come up in the course of tracking these different investments. There are accounting firms and wealth managers who will help you with that, but then maybe there's a cost involved in paying them, depending on what you structure. Michael Kislin in the back is one of the several private bankers here tonight who could help you with that. And that's another cost to you. And in general, there is no free lunch, right? So although in the average returns are good, it is perfectly possible to make 20 investments and see them all go to zero. So you should never invest in this class money you're not comfortable losing 100%. In most mutual funds, although yes, it is true, we could have a nightmare scenario and it goes down by 80%, but it's not that likely, right? Realistically, your worst case scenario is down 20%, down 30%. So that's a real consideration you should think about before putting money into this asset. So I published 2 years ago the first ever research study on best practices of origination on illiquid asset classes, specifically private equity and venture capital. So if you want the 10,000 word study, email me. This is going to be the study in 5 minutes. So this is probably the most striking study I've ever seen in looking at financial literature. This is a study of the returns of mutual fund investors, right? So people investing in the most liquid possible asset class after bonds, I guess. What is the difference between investing in a random company and companies where you went to school with the management of said company, right? So according to this published research study, published by some professors at HBS, the difference is 8.4%, 840 basis points. For any of you who've read the academic research in finance, that is a ludicrous result, right? I've never, ever seen any study of any kind whatsoever that showed a delta like that. This is not a Harvard effect, I'm sorry to say, right? This effect proved true if you went to school at, other schools and you just went to school with that CEO. That was the test. And the reason is you have more insight. When you go to the reunion and the CEO is there with the trophy wife talking about the yacht, maybe they're a little less focused on growing the company, right? That's good data to think about when you invest in a public company. So if you can get an 840 basis point higher return in the mutual fund space by investing in CEOs whom you have some connections with, all the more so is that true in the private equity and VC space, which is far more illiquid, far more opaque. So you want to invest in people you know or people with whom you have some connections so you can get real color on them, understand what's really going on. This is a high filter game. Susan shared data from Golden Seeds. At my firm, we look at north of 1,700 companies per year, and we'll invest in about one company a month, about a dozen. That's normal for the industry. The median private equity and VC fund looks at 87 companies before investing in one. So the thing is, to have good returns, you need to fill the top of the funnel. That's part of the point of an angel network, is you get more people who source more deals. For you as an individual, you're going to feed into that, right? You, as a member of any angel network, are part of the secret sauce that makes a network successful. So why do deals come to you? They're going to come to you because of your industry background, people know you, and whatever other area you differentiate on. So I've listed here in the PE and VC world some firm-wide differentiators. There are firms that specialize in women-led companies. There are lots of firms that specialize in various industries. You should think about what you're going to differentiate on. And as you speak with investment bankers and accountants and lawyers and other people in the ecosystem, say, I really am interested in deals of X. Because if you just say, I'm looking for money to invest, they don't remember that, right? But if you say, I'm looking to invest in XYZ, that's a trigger. So when they come across something like that, they reach out to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about social media for origination. So I wrote a book back in 2005 called The Virtual Handshake about how to use social media for sales, raising capital, and origination. And the impetus for that was my dating. I moved back to New York from living abroad in 2001. I was single, like 70% of Manhattan. And I registered on a bunch of online dating sites. And in 6 months, I met the woman I married. And I thought, any tool that can find me a wife is a killer app. In dating, most of us want one partner and then we're done. But in business, we want lots of partners, lots of investments, lots of investors. And the same tools that have revolutionized dating are in the process of revolutionizing business. So this is pertinent throughout the investing ecosystem. It's pertinent how you raise capital, how you add value, how you exit. But I'm going to focus specifically on how you use technology to originate more effectively. Given we have a numerate audience, I have a formula. This is the only formula in the whole presentation. So this is a formula to summarize your origination network. There's 7 main components. I'm going to talk for each of those 7 variables, how do you increase the value of that variable? How do you get more quality deals into your pipeline? Because you're only going to invest in about 1 out of 100. So the first is character, right? Before you invest in anyone, you of course want to do your diligence on them. And if they're a competent entrepreneur, they're going to do their diligence on you. Keep in mind, it's a 10-year relationship, which is longer than a lot of marriages. So they should be doing their background research on you. They should look on zoominfo.com, which is a great website that aggregates publicly available data about you. They'll look on Clout and see your Clout score. They'll look on LinkedIn, of course. And you should be doing the same and make sure that you've optimized your profile for your industries of interest. The next component is competence. You want to source investments from competent people because they're more likely to be able to execute. Not surprising. So another example, a friend of mine is an angel investor. He's a Stanford business school grad, a distinguished business school, almost as good as another one I know. And he's on the listserv for technology sector alumni in that of the Stanford GSB. And he sent an email saying we're looking for co-investors in a syndicate for a certain company that he had invested in. Raised $8 million from that email. So what was interesting to me is lots of people went to lots of elite schools, including many of you in this audience. Most people don't fully leverage this incredibly valuable assets that you and potentially your parents and maybe your grandparents spend a lot of money creating. So take advantage of it. Next is how do you connect with the people who are going to be most relevant to you and make sure they know about you. So in the VC world, it's become mainstream to use social media to publicize your areas of interest. About 10 to 15% of the active VC population blog and tweet. And that percentage, I'm sure, is higher than when that analysis was done. So that's because it is impossible for VCs to interact with all the entrepreneurs who are interested in them. But this allows VCs to create a digital footprint that pulls up people. I constantly get emails from people saying, I see you're interested in fitness, I see you're interested in data, because they've seen blog posts about that, and that attracts a deal flow to me. And I don't get med tech deals, which is fine, because we're not medical investors. That should go to Bob, right, and other people who actually know what they're doing in that space. I don't even want to be a customer of medtech, let alone an investor. So if you want to do it aggressively, you also should set up a blog, set up a website, or you can do it at a little lower scale. But keep in mind, that's what the professionals who are doing this for a living are doing. So it's worth emulating that. The next component of your sourcing network is strength. To the extent you have more higher strength relationships, that creates more deal flow for you. So an easy way to build the strength of your relationships is connect with people face to face. In the New York area in particular, we have this incredible asset called meetup.com. How many people here have been to a meetup? Right, so, sir, second row, what meetup did you go to? Stanford Tech, exactly. So Meetup is a website where you can say, I'm interested in X, in this geography, let me meet up with other people. You're interested in Stanford Tech? Great, you'll meet with those people. If you want to meet with people interested in, I don't know, app development for the iPhone 5, right? And there doesn't exist such a group in Connecticut, you can create one. It's free. Great vehicle to connect with people who share your particular interest in your particular geography. Next component is information. You need to have good information about the people in your network. So I've listed here some of the tools you should be using. When I interview salespeople, one of my standard questions is how many people are in your contact network and what technology do you use to track it? The wrong answer is a couple hundred and Excel. The correct answer is a real CRM system, a customer relationship management system like Salesforce or ACT or something, and some larger number if you're an experienced salesperson. So as an angel, you will find your popularity goes up significantly. It's not the plastic surgery. It's because you're in the business of giving away money and lots of people are looking for money. That said, you'll need to have some tools in place to track the entrepreneurs, the bankers, all the other people in your ecosystem. And I'd certainly recommend investing in a proper CRM system and some of the other tools I've listed here so you can track that. This is, as I will get to shortly, one of the key assets you have to help your companies is the ability to introduce them to clients, to investors, to other people in the ecosystem. Next component is what information do you know about what the people in your sourcing network are doing. So our portfolio company, Bottlenose, which is raising around incidentally, Bottlenose is a great tool for tracking this. You go to Bottlenose and type in, say, the Twitter handles of companies and people you're tracking, and you get a live feed of what they're doing. Very helpful to inform you before that key meeting, before you go to that conference, so you know what's going on. And to alert you when, for example, some entrepreneur in your space is visiting Connecticut, opportunity to reach out to them. The penultimate component of your sourcing network is the number of people in your network. So what we see in the evolution of social media is the patterns of people interacting online mirror the ways that they interact face-to-face. And we've seen a boom in gated online communities for executives. For example, here in Connecticut, there's a group called the Executive Forum, which specializes in, it is exclusively for senior executives who typically in transition, although not always, and they get together, they bring in speakers, they also, I believe, have an affiliated angel group, and it's a great resource if you fit that test. CERMO is for medical folks, the IRG, which I'm a member of, is for senior international executives. Those are resources you should be leveraging. It's a lot cheaper than a golf club, and it's a way to connect with other people in your space. This also applies in the investing universe. So I've listed here the major gated online communities for professional investors. For those of you interested in the public markets and the late stage private markets, there are gated communities for you. But let me focus on the left-hand side of the page, the gated communities for early stage private companies. Gus.com provides the back end for the majority of angel groups in America. We use it. Golden Seeds, I believe, uses it. And when you apply online to our website or Golden Seeds, you are applying via the Gus.com website. So that's a vehicle to identify deal flow, literally go online and search. In practice, by the way, very few angels do this, and the reason is it's not gated. There are too many low-quality companies there. Most angels gate by their referral network. Another extremely powerful tool is AngelList, angel.co, which in a matter of 2 years has become an extremely important player in the early-stage ecosystem. If you want to dip your toes in the angel waters, one of the ways to do it is go into Gust or AngelList, look for a deal that's already half full, and join the syndicate. Last component of your sourcing network is diversity. And this sounds very politically correct, but it's backed up by the academic research. If your network is weighted towards Connecticut hedge fund folks, so that's fine, right? That's an interesting group of people, but they're not usually tech entrepreneurs or fast growth entrepreneurs, right? So you need to get out of your circle and connect with people who are in different industries, different backgrounds. I often get asked as yet another white male investor why I was formative in creating the Venture Capital Access Program, and part of it was I wanted to get out of my box. I wanted to connect with people I would not otherwise connect with. Next topic is structuring. So this is a huge topic. Let me talk about how to cheat the structuring issue. So the first way to cheat it is don't lead a deal. As an early stage angel, if you're not experienced, don't even try. Join a syndicate led by other people who've been around the block and read all the docs so you get familiar with what is normative. Work off of the standard term sheet. So for example, the basis of our standard term sheet at my firm is the National Venture Capital Association term sheet, which you can download from their website free. We use a slight modification of that. I suggest you do the same. The terms in there are standard, they work, they make sense over the life cycle of the typical company. So I would focus your negotiating energy on price, which is negotiated, not really valued in a conventional sense, and things like that, before worrying about all the fine print. Once you get more experience, you can worry about the fine print. Obviously, get an appropriate lawyer. I'm sure we have some lawyers tonight who could help you. Raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Okay, one. Wow. Okay, so that's the domain expert in the room. So that's a way to get up to speed, is use that as a mentor. If you're part of an angel group, that's one of the reasons why angels who invest in groups get better returns than angels who invest alone. Because effectively, you're sharing the burden of paying for appropriate counsel, right? Because you're riding on the advice of someone who's done that work, typically the lead investor. Last topic that I'll discuss is how do you add value to a company? So in the current printed in a week or so issue of Journal of Private Equity, I have a study coming out, which I wrote with some McKinsey and BCG consultants, on best practices of adding value to private companies by VCs. So let me summarize that 10,000-word study in 5 minutes. So there are 7 main tools that you as an angel have for adding value to a portfolio company. First one is team. It is absolutely critical whom the company recruits. A company is the people at this stage of the game. Once you're up and running, then you could lose some of your staff and you'll survive, but that's not true at all at this stage. So your ability to introduce them to executives, to filter talent, to have credibility, right? By definition, a startup doesn't have a brand, doesn't have credibility. So if they can say, well, Bob Dahl invested, that's kind of helpful, right? If you're trying to recruit healthcare talent who will respect his acumen in that space. Next is operations. So the typical entrepreneur is good at 1 or 2 functions. Maybe they're really good programmers, or they're really good salespeople. They sold you, right? They got you to put money in. And they're usually not so good at the other functions. It's rare to find the multi-talented executive. So your ability to support them in the functions in which they're less skilled correlates with their success. Third is perspective. Whether or not you are a formal board member, it's really helpful to have an outside voice who will say the strategy doesn't really make sense. I completely admit, in my experience as a serial entrepreneur, I definitely have done some stupid things, which if I had been a board member of said company, I would have said, really, David, not so smart. Like, you really shouldn't do that. But I was in the midst of it. I was hustling, right? I didn't have that outside perspective. It was up to my wife or board member or other such outside people to provide that perspective. So really helpful to have someone like you who can do that. Next is skill building. As a CEO develops, they're going to build out their toolkit. And if you can teach them the tricks of the trade, maybe you're a really good salesperson and they're not, but if you can coach them on how to build a sales skill set, or at least how to hire salespeople, that's really helpful so that they can manage the company effectively. Next is customer development, introducing them to customers as you go along. If you've taken money from Susan, I'm sure she knows some financial services companies that might be clients if you're selling to that market. Next is analysis. This is something that an angel network can do that an individual typically can't, is provide access to data about, say, typical valuations at the A round, at the B round, typical deal terms. That's very, very helpful in the negotiation with an entrepreneur, is to be able to say, look, the market norms are X. And you as an individual probably have less access to that data than the typical angel network. And the last is network. It really does make a difference having a systematic approach towards identifying what people the entrepreneur should meet. One of my standard questions in board meetings is, how can we help you, and what sort of people are you looking to meet? And then I go through we use Rolodex, although that's an outdated term. I go through my Salesforce database, and I have my colleagues do the same. Say, okay, who do we know who is a CIO of a Fortune 1000 company, who could be a client of Social Fortress, which is a company I'm on the board of, right? And we'll make introductions as appropriate, and that's helpful to the company.